Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 13 of the Ark Podcast. I have a topic discussion today we are going to be covering. What does it mean to be un-Australian? It's an insult that's often thrown around by Australians. Why is it the elites often use it to get their own way, and then also say that Australians have no culture and it's just about sausage sizzles and sauce? Are all cultures equal? Yeah, we're going there. How do we avoid the coming civil war as we've seen in the UK and America? How can we avoid it as a country and come together? How do we pick up the pieces of our national identity after Anthony Albanese's failed voice referendum last year? Should Australia have a unifying culture to bind us together, or is it okay to be multicultural? When did our immigration rate go too far? Should Australians have multiple flags? When someone moves to Australia, what basic values should they imbue and abide by? Are we policing those values strictly enough when people come in? This and much, much more. And to help me pick this apart, on my right, I've got Chris de Bruyn, who is a protest filmer and someone that's actually covered many freedom movement protests that we've seen around the country, and a content creator. On my right, a familiar face from my voice interview, Moe Sari, who's a family man. He's a man that is he's a Muslim, and he is someone that is very excited to keep Australia the way that we had it for decades. On my left, I've got host of the Other Side podcast, Damien Curry, who has actually covered similar topics like this in the past and is a voice that has come out of the COVID madness. And on my far left, I've got Paul Vallejo, who is nothing far left about him, someone that is a former NASA worker, a nuclear expert on nuclear energy, and someone who has appeared on the show previously. So, ladies and gentlemen, getting right into it, this is a very difficult topic. And this is a topic that I'm very frustrated that the ABC is not covering. On Q&A on the ABC's show, the ABC being an organisation that gets $1 billion every year in your taxpayer funds, I don't feel that they're covering this properly. I feel that they're stacking the audience with people that are all of the same hive mind, and they use the power of that to actually bully people on the panel into an opinion that really the majority of Australians don't actually share. And so one of the things that I'm really excited to actually cover is these topics with you. But before we get into it, if you want to support the podcast, if you want to follow us on all the different platforms, feel free to screenshot this QR code, which actually has all of our social media on it. If you want to become a $5 a month sponsor, someone that can support the content and keep the lights on, please do scan that code, screenshot it now, and follow it up later. But without further ado, let's get into the podcast. The first video I want to play is from the ABC's Q&A, and a lovely lady asks a question about why her values, if she feels like Australia is becoming so far disconnected from their values. She makes reference to her daughter in a public school, and she is really worried about where things are going, and we're going to spur the conversation on from that. So this is the clip we're going to play now. Here we go.
Before, went to the local state public school and were dictated to that multiculturalism is a great thing. I don't believe it is, as I feel that the culture of the original British/Irish majority has been demonised constantly for the last 3 decades. Case in point, frequent vandalism of memorials to Captain Cook. How does democracy fit into this atmosphere of beat up the white guy?
Anna Lee. Thank you for your question. I do have to disagree with you. I think multiculturalism isn't a thing, it's what we are. It's the character of our nation. It's not a policy that was foisted on anyone. Take a look around you. We are multicultural. It is who we are. It is who we are, and I think it has brought immense benefits to this country. As somebody who migrated here myself, I think multiculturalism has brought immense benefits. And I'm not talking about being able to have some soy sauce on your sausage roll or being able to wear a sari or any of those things. I'm talking about democracy is more resilient and is better when there are diverse ideas, diverse thinking, of faiths, diversity of cultural backgrounds. Democracy is better for it. I don't think we bash the white guy, as you might say, and perhaps if we were to trade places for a day, you might think differently. because I get quite a bit of racism. Who would have thought? So I think if we were to trade places and if we had the opportunity to walk in each other's shoes, you might think differently.
Damien, you were shaking your head. What's your gut reaction to that? And is that the first time you've seen
well, like most ABC content, I want to vomit. So I try not to watch the ABC very much. I'm probably the only person who's worked there out of the five of us.
Really?
But, oh, yeah. I was
What happened to it?
1989. I was the Queensland breakfast morning radio news presenter. I was only 22 years old, but, that was a different ABC then. And without getting too far away from the topic, but very quickly, those days it was like the Triple J people were the kids, and you had an overlay of management, right? And I was a bit of a lefty in those days, a bit of a activist little journalist kid with the pea brain, and they excuse me, the older people, the grown-ups, would keep us in check. Right? Yeah. What's happened to the ABC now? This is just my theory, but I think that the Triple J people have all grown up. And they've moved into management positions, and they've moved on to the metro radio stations and other jobs. Yeah. And they haven't matured. They've never worked outside the organisation. Right. And as a result, it really is a case of the kids are running the asylum, to put it nicely. And it's a really dangerous situation because you've got this. It's not. They always go on about ABC bias, being about, we're not giving enough time to the right-wing political parties, and they always say, we are though, we are. It's not that. It's not about time and how much it's what you leave out. It's the embedding, or what I call bias by omission, right? And it's the cultural underbelly that underlies every single minute of ABC coverage of anything, right? It's just there. It's a cultural, disturbance. And you see it in that clip. What did we see? Yeah. As soon as that woman started to talk about traditional conservative values and family, she's mocked, she's laughed at, and then airtime is given to this patronising, quite ignorant, ill-informed woman. I don't know who was that? Do you know who that was?
I'll pull that up.
We will find out.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm sorry, that was profoundly ill-informed. Multiculturalism is a policy. It was formally introduced in the 1970s, and the other things that she said were just, we could talk about those, but I think they're pretty crazy.
Before I go any further, I probably should have done this to start with, but I'm going to go through the panel. Damien, can you give us your background, your ethnicity, and your general background that you reckon is relevant to this sort of discussion?
Yeah, sure. So my ethnicity is kind of interesting. It's Irish Lebanese. So my mum and dad, well, actually all my grandparents were born in Australia except my Lebanese maternal grandmother, who was born in the US. So nobody was born in their native country. Yeah. But my Lebanese side, it's a Catholic Christian Lebanese like you, and I understand that we're from Batroun, somewhere in Batroun. I've never been to Lebanon, unfortunately. I've been wanting to get there, but have been remiss of me not to get there. Right. My mum's side was Irish, and both my parents were from Brisbane. I grew up in Brisbane. My parents did not travel much, so we were very much, and I grew up in the Greek-Italian sort of ethnic, if I can say it, WOG area of Brizzy, the inner city West End, which in the 70s sort of became a bit more of a Vietnamese area. The Greeks moved out to the suburbs a bit more. I went to school there, grew up there. Went into broadcast journalism out of school, worked at 4BC, then moved to Melbourne when I was 19, worked at 3AW. Went back to Brizzy, worked at the ABC, worst year of my life. Then I was news director at Triple M Brisbane, FM 104 back in the day. And I went back to 4BC and hosted the Drive show and read the news for a few years there in the newsroom there. And then I left radio, decided that it was time to try TV, started working for Channel 10 in Brizzy in 97 and moved down here, down to Sydney rather, and did 2 years at Channel 10 Sydney. And then I left media and went into public relations, spent 20 years in PR, went to Hong Kong, and just came back to Australia 2020 with COVID, and Can't believe the cultural change. Cannot believe it.
It's amazing.
Completely different.
You've never been asked that on camera, have you? Your history, have you?
I sat down and had many chats with Matt Wong at Discernible in 2021 when Discernible were producing The Other Side, my video podcast. So I did a few Discernible interviews with Matt where we talked about my history.
Right, I must have missed it. Paul, yourself?
Yeah. Well, as it applies to this topic, I mean, this just drives me nuts in so many different ways. I've been to 50 countries. The idea that things are that culture doesn't make a difference, that Australia doesn't have a extremely positive culture in the place of the world. I'm a child of immigrants. I'm an immigrant myself. My cultural and historical background includes colonizer and colonized. And so I pay reparations to myself on a weekly basis. This is it's just such an unhelpful beat up when it comes to this self-flagellation. About one of the most successful, wonderful countries in the world. And, having been to 50 countries, I came here for a reason. And it was a conscious choice pick out of having seen the way many peoples around the world interact with themselves. And there are positive and negative aspects to many cultures. But to say it doesn't make a difference, to how, I like people to be or how well an economy succeeds, it makes an enormous difference. And we have one of the most wonderful places in the world to live, and the idea that we don't value it and its culture is abhorrent to me.
Yeah, but you've got a bit of, I think you forgot to tell them you've got a bit of Native American in you.
Yeah. So my father comes from Ecuador, and so I've got some Native American in me, and my mom is Swedish, so I got a bit of Viking, so colonizer and colonized, and so it's a little complicated, in terms of but honestly, I don't think about it because I think we all have a way we like the world to be. Yeah. The way we like to treat people, the way we like to interact, and the idea of the cultural values that allow people to work together is a melting pot in some places, and it's civil war and sectarian violence in others. And I prefer the non-sectarian violence way of going about things.
Yeah, Chris, tell me.
Suck the culture, bigot, and sit at the back of the bus. Shut up about that you feel that you're being offended by whatever it is. We're in charge now. The private school Meridian girl, elected MP who fled the civil war in the United Arab Republic. Now, with her PhD in counterterrorism, tells you that your feelings don't matter because I saw racism today, she says. This inner city resident, particularly wealthy with the rest of her family, engineer, she has.
Do you mean the
Anna Lee?
Anna Lee is
she's an MP.
She's an MP. She's in cabinet, right?
Teal?
No, she's Labour.
Labour.
She's Labour. Yeah.
Labour.
Yeah, right.
I don't think there's all the Teals are white.
Yes.
All the Teals are female.
All the Teals are female. Yes. Oh, yes.
Gucci green.
Back to Anna Lee's sneer at the woman saying, "Hey, I feel this. What do you think?"
Yeah.
The response was, "Well, I feel racism, so shut up."
Yeah.
I feel. What about me?
That's right.
This woman says,
"Walk
I
around in my
feel."
shoes, even though I'm as white as the driven snow myself. She's whiter than I am.
And that's where we come to it, Damien, because it doesn't matter about what your ethnicity might be. It's about how we look at you. We may sit here and say, "Oh, we don't see race," because this is actually quite a multicultural. Every panel with Journalists, look at all of us, right? Yeah, exactly. My mum was so brown that she got discriminated against school. She was kept out of the sun because she was so brown.
What was her background? Sorry,
Portuguese.
And what was your dad's side?
My father's Belgian, Flemish.
Okay. There you go. Diverse. So we literally don't have a white guy. I brought you on here to be a token white guy, and we don't have a token white guy.
Damn, we lost it. I could be half a token white guy.
Freaking Paul's let me down, and
whiteness. It's about whiteness, multicultural whiteness. It's not about the colour of your skin anymore. It's about how you see the world. And we're all here quite white.
And we will get into her comments again, Chris. But oh my God, like she was making the point. I don't bash the white guy, and we were sitting with a panel of coloured dudes, and we're like, what the hell? Just leave the white dude alone. He's gotten enough crap already. And then she hits us with the soy, Australian values isn't your soy sauce on your sausage roll. Who puts soy sauce on a sausage roll?
Patronising, condescending, talking down. I mean, that's all the characteristics of that mentality, right? Where it's just pathetic, and I'm tired of it. I really am.
Moe, can you tell me your background?
So I'm Australian Lebanese, brought up in Western Sydney at Bankstown. I went to a Islamic school from as young as I can remember, kindergarten, right? Growing up, we were never told, to play victim, you're Lebanese, you're not white. This is something that's come recently that I found. For as long as I remember, we used to recite the Australian anthem. We're proud to be Australian. This is what I remember being in an Islamic school from kindergarten onwards. It was a good atmosphere. We're always told to be proud to be Australian. In my, professional career, running a business, you sort of get thick skin and you understand how the world operates. It sort of teaches a person, right? I've realized that you can't always play victim. And the ones that play victim, using their identity or whatever, are people not cultured to, govern us or run us or even speak for us. So I've done a bit of traveling myself. I've traveled to the United States. I've worked in America. And when I travel, people ask, I can tell you're Australian, got that accent. And they're actually astounded by, our culture. And, I tell everyone that I'm an Australian. I don't tell them I'm Lebanese or Muslim. First and foremostly, I'm an Australian man. And, they're pretty fascinated about our country. I've met, people in the US military and I get along with them just based on conservative traditional values,
Yeah, and that's really what I want to lean into here. What we're seeing going on in the UK, Europe, America, I'm horrified. I'm actually horrified because I know if that continues to come here, and it is slightly coming here, I'm encouraged that 60 to 70% of the country opposed what Albo was putting forward and selling with the voice proposal. So I'm encouraged that the people are here, but the forces of darkness, the forces of division and dividing the country, they really want to push this because it empowers them more to take, it's divide and conquer, a classic thing. The reason I brought you guys in, it wasn't an accident. It's because I know every single one of you, and correct me if I'm wrong, voted no in the 2017 same-sex marriage vote, voted against or pushed against the lockdowns, against the mandatory jabs, and you're against the voice. And that's what's really interesting because it transcends all of the cultural things. It's not ethnic. There's no ethnic, similarities with us. There's clearly, we're all from different sort of parts of the world. And what's crazy about it is we all opposed it. I mean, they were setting up vaccine hubs in the churches and in the mosques during COVID. The places that were locked down in Sydney, at least, they were all the same places that voted no in the LGBT
correct
same-sex marriage vote.
Yep.
And yet we had Muslim leaders endorsing the voice. We had Muslim leaders, going along with the lockdowns and setting up vaccine hubs.
Correct.
And similarly with the, the Maronite churches in Western Sydney as well. And that's like, okay, that's why I want you guys here. Because we're clearly stuck together that with something that resembles something of the Australian national anthem. I mean, what did you guys have, with all of that, what did you guys think about that?
I mean, in terms of Western Sydney and what's happened, it doesn't make sense to me, especially in the Muslim community always voting left. I just want to tell all the Australians out there, Islam is a conservative traditional religion. So it doesn't make sense to me how Western Sydney is always voting left. I think it's more, they play on the emotions of Muslims, the whole immigration thing and feeling, foreign policy. But I think first and foremost, Australians should vote based on what's going to benefit us as Australians, our freedoms, our freedom to resist vaccines, all that sort of stuff, We should, I don't want to push the sectarian thing. I think, there's a lot of cultures in Australia, but if we unite just based on religious principles, that would go such a long way. I can tell you as a Muslim that Islam has a lot in common with Christianity, and we actually do not hate Christians or have any ill intent towards them. I think if we get the message out there and create some sort of unity, it will be a big bonus.
Because you don't want Sharia law.
No, I don't.
And that's why I set this whole
Sharia
thing
law.
up.
Sharia law specifically says I have to respect the laws of the country that I live in. I don't want Sharia law. Why would I impose Sharia law as a minority Muslim onto the rest of the population? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I get really annoyed when I see this topic because there's a lot of people that don't know much about Islam and they're like, oh yeah, they all think the same. They all want the same thing. It's like, no, hang on a sec. There are thousands of denominations of Christianity. And they all want different things and often crazy things. And sometimes we amplify the voices of the Wahhabists or the Islamists, the really hardcore Muslims, and we actually. There's a lot of Muslims that have been grandfathered into Australia and a lot of other cultures, and it's like, no, there was something about Australia we like, and we want that to stay.
In God's wisdom, I was born in Australia. I'm a second generation Aussie. So I've got this dual loyalty. I want to benefit Australia for what it is. I want to respect the culture and make Australia as great as it can be. I also have a loyalty towards my religion, but that's back at home. It's got nothing to do with Australia.
Yeah, right.
They're two separate things.
And more to that point, I'm an integrationist in the sense that, when I came here, how do I integrate into the culture? You don't come to a place and want to change it. If you move to a place, it's you value it, and so you wanna add to it and integrate into the culture and the country that you come into, and be a benefit to the place that has let you in. I've hitched my wagon to this train, and if I thought it needed to be changed, well, then I shouldn't have come here. So that's that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Our parents escaped war from Lebanon. When my grandfather came in the 50s, he was escaping war in Lebanon and to give his family a better life. And for us to be we know this being second generation Aussies. That's why I'm saying we want the better for this country, better for everyone. We don't want to impose our beliefs on anybody. Our religion actually says not to do that. There's no compulsion in religion. Perfect example.
Well, can I go back to the discussion? I do want to hear Damien and Chris's take on this. Can I ask a really stupid question? So this is going to what was said in that discussion. Australia is a multicultural country. It's not what it should or shouldn't be. She was saying it's what it is.
No,
I don't.
No.
Can you help me? What does it mean?
It was a policy, and the original definition of multiculturalism, because people were concerned about it, obviously in the 70s, and the original concept was that you maintain a very strong core culture, and then you have these other cultures around that core culture, right?
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the true definition of multiculturalism. And they promised us that wouldn't be lost, right? Then it all changed. I think only Canada and Australia are multicultural nations officially.
Yeah.
But then it kind of changed, obviously, culturally over time, and it became now what most people think is as ignorant as that.
Yeah.
That multiculturalism means you just have a melting pot of different values, and the God
equal.
is diversity. It's got to be diversity. And she talked about diversity of thought, diversity of ideas. Well, it's good to hear that for a change instead of just diversity of skin color and diversity of religion and diversity, right? But the idea that you can have a cohesive... I'll tell you a story about my dad. He was a very prominent school principal in special education in Queensland, and he became an inspector of schools before he retired. And in the early 1970s, because he was, probably just one of the wogs in the department, they hauled him in to a meeting. I'm sure he went voluntarily. But he tells the story that, he was quizzed and asked about multiculturalism. It was like, well, what do you think about it? Shouldn't we have multiculturalism? Surely he'll back it.
No.
And it was, he talked about the white, middle-aged, angry woman that was sort of questioning him, and how outraged so it's nothing new, right? How outraged she was by the fact that he said, actually, this can't work, right? And this is a guy, my dad was born in Casino, New South Wales. He, grew up in Brisbane. But he was very connected to his Lebanese culture in Australia. Never left the country in his whole 90-year life. But he had this sort of, he always said to me, multiculturalism, this concept of multiculturalism will not work because no country can be coherent without a core set of agreed values, right? You don't have a nation if you don't have a core set of agreed principles, right? And then you can overlay other cultures, but it's got to be, you're bringing your Maronite Christian views, or you're bringing your Muslim views, or whatever. Okay, you can have that diversity, but that core, what are your core beliefs? What are your core, it's like Mo says, he's Australian first, that's that, and then, I have my religion around that, that's fine. But, if you're going to live in Australia, you have to commit to certain values of this culture and of this country.
Can we break?
The Australian values, the thing on Home Affairs website, I had a good read of that.
Oh, I've got it. I've got it here, actually.
So this is the as defined by public service bureaucrats.
Right. of all people.
I'm sure it's lovely.
But
Actually,
did you want me to read? Did you want me to read them out? Or?
It's up to you, but just reading that, I'm like, it's such an easy thing to abide by. I've got nothing against it.
When I became a
I'd like to
citizen,
know
I
what
had
it
to
said.
sign that statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just so you know, guys, and just so everyone that's following us online, this is very free-flowing, guys. We're not going to resolve this in one sit-down, but this is very free-flowing. This is a classic discussion on the show. So the temporary and provisional visa applicants, as well as permanent visa applicants, this is what they basically have to go through. All relevant permanent visa applicants must sign this, essentially, in order to go through. I understand, so this is a declaration, I understand that Australian society values respect for freedom and dignity of the individual, freedom of religion, including freedom not to follow a particular religion, freedom of speech and freedom of association, commitment to the rule of law, which means that all people are subject to the laws and should obey it, parliamentary democracy, whereby our laws are determined by parliamentarians elected by the people, that those laws being paramount and overriding any other inconsistent religious or secular laws, equality of opportunity for all people, regardless of their gender, sexual orientation, age, disability, race, or national or ethnic origin, a fair go for all that embraces mutual respect, tolerance, compassion for those in need, equality of opportunity for us all. The English language as the national language and as an important unifying element of Australia's society. And I understand to conduct myself in accordance with these values in the Australian society and during my stay in Australia, and to obey the laws of Australia. I don't see a problem with that, but I see a problem with the government abiding by that.
Yeah, they've violated freedom of speech. You know, like
Actually.
Unbelievable.
In 2020, 2021, where was my freedom of association or the freedom of speech for doctors as well as people who just wanted to go about their lives without a mandatory injection?
Where was the dignity of the individual in being able to leave your home and decide whether or not you wanted to have an injection of a new vaccine?
Yeah,
Because it's about power. Because all of it is about power. Because from culture, you can derive power and say to Murray, give me power and I represent your culture. Damien, give me power and I represent your culture.
Bend the knee.
One of the best and one of the only ways to get power is to lie. That statement there, all of us live within minutes of suburbs which don't just speak more than 50% English at home, but I think you'll find all of us, I certainly live within suburbs that are more than 50% not English fluent. So how can you be signing that statement, which every citizen must, and it be true? It's called lying, because you don't. You just show up, you sign the piece of paper or whatever it is. Paul, you may have read what you were signing, but most people didn't. Most people didn't.
I agreed with it.
They had to swear an oath to the king or queen. And I don't think they would have even known who that is if you showed a portrait to them just a month later. I don't think anyone would. Oh, who's this? Who's this? We could all go to a different suburbs and hold a portrait up of the king. Oh, who's that? Don't know. Looks like a monarch. You could hold up any king and they'd say it's King Charles. You could hold up any queen and they'd say it's Queen Elizabeth. It's called lying. They lied to that middle-aged woman in Casino when she was outraged, saying that someone didn't agree with the idea of multiculturalism then. The definition of it was completely different then from what it was today. Only when we got to 1988 did we significantly see what it is now, and we're going to change it again. We're moving on from the melting pot. It's a tossed salad of multiculturalism.
I'd like to break down that word a bit, multiculturalism.
Yeah.
What do we actually think it means, and which aspects of multiculturalism are positive and negative? Because there are authoritarian aspects of multiculturalism, morally neutral aspects of multiculturalism, and ones that have actually real bite. You know, for instance, having different foods and different styles of clothing, okay, everyone can live together like that. But if you have differences where you have to bend the knee to certain, gods or fundamental disagreements that cause violence, well, then that's a problem. So, maybe if we could break down the word a little bit.
No, I totally agree. And I think, look, a culture is, derived, and a people are derived by that. Land they come from, and their history, and the language that they come from, and their traditions that they've passed down. But I think, Damien, you hit the nail on the head when you said Australia is not meant to be a multicultural place in the sense of the word that it's become to mean. We're meant to have an umbrella called the Australian culture, and then under that, lots of little umbrellas. Yeah. But they all are encompassed, and the dominant culture is Australian culture. So
we have to acknowledge that the dominant Australian culture is British, right? It came from Britain. We don't acknowledge that. We don't, and I'm saying this as an Irish guy, and I mean, what a lot of new Australians don't understand is how divided Australia was between Protestants and Catholics. And the Irish and English in the sort of right up until the 60s, really.
Yeah.
There were there was, the Liberal Party was the Protestant Party, and the Labor Party was the Catholic Party, and there were department stores in my hometown of Brisbane There was one department store that was the Catholic department store that hired all Catholics, and that's where they shopped. And then there was a department store across, I'm not kidding, diagonally across the road that was the Protestant one, and that's where they all shopped. I mean, but we've got to acknowledge that Britain, that our values didn't just fall out of the sky, right? They're not. You don't just go, oh, here, this is how all countries operate. Yeah. And so now, and I think that's because most people haven't travelled outside of Australia. They haven't been to 50 countries like you. Yep. I had a multi-regional, multinational job for a long time, and I got to travel to 25 countries. You really see the difference, right? Yeah. This is a special place, and it's a special place because it was built on a rule of law that was established through hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of years of evolution and trial and error and lots of error. And lots of bloodshed, right, to kind of get there. Yeah. And so you can't just turn your back on that and say we don't have a core culture. Yeah. We have a really important core culture. We need to define it, and we need to stand by it. Yeah. And you can't define it with Kamala words like dignity of the individual, free speech and association. It has to be much more specific than that. We have to be okay about saying these are our core values. And defining them. And I think 3 that we could start with would be freedom, peace, and prosperity. And there's a lot in those, right? Because peace speaks to our rule of law and our parliamentary system that says, instead of, why is the Westminster system evolved? Right? It evolved so that you didn't have violence. So instead of people having riots in the street and beating each other up and having wars, you had a place where you could go and debate and argue and agree, and then everybody respected that institution
until the king suspends it and gets Cromwell to fix things.
Okay,
I like the American style system.
There's that, right? And I guess the point I'm making is when you start to get to a point where you start to look at the institutions and you don't have any faith in them anymore, that they're not representing you because you've got a uni party. Or you've got 2 parties that, you've got an opposition that isn't being an opposition. Yep. They can't even stand up and say it's wrong to not let somebody like Candace Owens into the country just because she has some different views. We're not even going to let her speak here. I mean, let's think about it. That's insane. Yeah, it's a mother of 3.
Yeah, well, that's another topic we've got to go into. I mean, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to this, but Candace Owens, once again, whenever Joel tries to put on a tour on, it's just like, well, let's fire everything at it.
You bring
basically
problems.
Yeah, you're a troublemaker.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, this is why I do what I do, because I really, and again, it's not just me. There's a whole team behind me and what we're doing. But Candace Owens, she wants to come out from the 14th of November to the 22nd of November. You can see the dates at candacelive.com.au. And the Peter Dutton and many in the Jewish lobby basically are lobbying to try and keep her out of the country. And what's astonishing is, in New Zealand, not even the Jewish lobby there are saying she should be banned. They're saying,
and to be fair, the AJA, the Australian Jewish Association, the right-wing Jewish lobby, conservative Jewish lobby, are saying, okay, they're worried about what she was saying, but they don't support her being kept out of the country.
Doesn't she represent diversity?
Well,
wrong kind of diversity.
See, that's the thing. Wrong kind of diversity,
my kind of
right?
opinion.
The only kind of diversity that counts to them is the most shallow form of diversity. Everyone looks different and thinks the same, as opposed to the reverse. Yeah. Actually have a diverse debate and diversity of thought is what matters. Your skin color shouldn't matter.
Yeah. No. So Paul Damien, actually, did you end up asking her about what the attempt to ban her? Because your interview
we just did the interview, recorded it this morning for tonight's show, and we're recording this on a Friday. So by the time this goes to air, everyone will probably have seen the interviews. But she basically is just shocked. She said to me, it's like, is Australia okay? Are you still a democracy, more or less? And she was only half joking. I mean, and I relayed a story. A mate of mine sent me a text this morning. I couldn't believe it. Very coincidental. He's on holiday in Spain. Sends me a text this morning saying, I went to a winery and had a drink, bumped into an American girl, and she asked him, is Australia a democracy?
I got the same question when I was in America.
You're in trouble when the black American woman is saying we need to invade Australia and spread democracy.
She's just kidding.
She's just kidding, obviously, but it was funny during COVID because it was just like, I could use some help. We could use some help because they've strayed from the values. And we just read the values on the Australian website.
What she did say, by the way, was just that if a politician in America tried to say, we're going to block somebody because of their speech, and they, it's like a mother of three who's just a commentator, not a violent person with a serious threat to the country, they would be hounded out of office. She said, so culturally there is still that real commitment to freedom in the US that we probably have lost a bit here.
And by the way, guys, just to tie a nice bow on that, I do believe we're going to get her visa, and if we don't, we'll definitely be challenging it. But the idea that they allowed Tucker Carlson in so soon, and also Djokovic, who they blocked previously.
Can I say on Tucker Carlson though?
Yeah.
I was on a video call with their producers before it was out that they were out. They had no idea that this visa issue would happen.
Seriously.
It is not widely known, and the only way that they did end up getting a visa when they did was a high-placed Labour-leaning lawyer, a celebrity lawyer. This is really hard to do, and it takes lining pockets of Labour politicians to get there. So Joel, all power to you, but Tucker faced a massive uphill journey. I was on a video call, and they had no idea. Their faces, the producers' faces just went white, and they went, what? As I showed them all of these visas that have been cancelled.
But what about Dan Tian? The shadow immigration spokesman, right? Also calling for this to happen, and Lisa, the MP from Victoria, saying that he also wants her banned. It's like, I'm sorry, are you supposed to be the opposition? I want to finish that point I was making before, and this really leads into it. Sorry, Joel, I'm talking too much, and I'll shut up in a minute.
No, this is why we do 2 hours.
The point I was trying to get to is that if you don't have an opposition that's actually acting as an opposition, and you don't have a parliament that's actually having that, what happens? People get disenfranchised, disillusioned, angry. What do? They go to the streets, right? And so the very reason Parliament exists, which is to stop the violence, goes by the by, and then we see riots. And then you see the elites going, oh, gee, why are there riots happening in the UK right now? Oh, well, for how many years have people been telling you they have no faith in the Conservative Party?
They don't feel represented.
Working class don't have any faith in the Labor Party. The Conservatives don't have any faith in the Conservative Party. They all carry on like there's nothing wrong for 10 years. Then when it all explodes in their face, they go, oh, what's going on here?
When you realise democracy is an illusion.
And it's even worse than that, isn't it, Paul? Because then they start, all they know by that point is how to hit stuff. Right. So they're a hammer in search of a nail. And so when that pops up, they're just like bam, 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 and it gets worse. And they don't know. They so believe in their own virtue that they're like we But it's like, but hang on, there are decades of Pakistani rape gangs going after, these girls, these white girls in these rural areas, like in Rotherham and all these other. I might be getting Rotherham and Rotterdam, mixed up, but it's actually happening in both cities, which is heartbreaking.
Yep.
But it's disgusting, and when I see that happening, and you don't give people, it's like shaking up this isn't the sort of drink that bursts, but if this was Coke and you shake it, and democracy is going to Parliament and just slowly easing it, slowly letting the pressure out. But when you don't do that and you shake, and then you pull it off quickly, and these protests just sort of burst it out, it just goes everywhere. And that's the problem we've got right now. But Chris, you've been very quiet, and you've got a very interesting insight on this topic. Freedom protests. We see people from every religion, every skin color. Why do you think that is? When you went out there and filmed these freedom protests in the COVID years, I'd like to think they all subscribe to these values.
Lockdowns are actually quite equal in that way. But what got people the most angry was that it was Western Sydney, multicultural, or should I say Islamic areas that were the most determined to come out there. Why were there so many different groups? Well, we also got to lead into is that why it also broke apart as well is because it was an annealing of so many different people's views and values that then had to work out how do we Ricardo Bersi, how do we now try and keep these together? And that's why we're seeing this moment is it is multicultural. There has not been the assimilation integration that came together over lockdowns, that one issue that was there. And now how do we keep this kind of ragtag group together? Who's going to lead it? Are we going to go and hail Putin in one direction? Or is this how are we going to deal with these multicultural issues? And that's why it struggled, because it's so divided, because there was no dialogue between it.
Yeah, and that's what's really helpful.
Western Sydney, they came down hard during the lockdowns,
Yeah.
When they locked up Western Sydney, it was one of the first.
Yeah, that's right.
Liverpool.
Yeah.
It was Liverpool targeted lockdowns.
Targeted, yeah.
Yeah, because you were the least compliant in southwestern Sydney.
Yeah, and then Bondi, where they would go beach.
Yep.
They had their freedom, and then Western Sydney, it was that was just something ready to erupt.
On the same day, I filmed down in Guildford, horses running down the main street. I filmed that, and not 6 hours later, I was on Bondi Beach filming people. You know the workout boys on the beach. Rollerblading. How's things?
And I think the outbreak started from someone in Bondi coming to Western Sydney. I mean, something ridiculous like that.
You know, people forget these things. One of the astonishing things about the Sydney response, and again, God forbid you go to a Melbourner and you tell them that we got it a little bit tough in Sydney. They're like, no, we copped it the worst. And it's like, okay.
It's funny, I was in Melbourne during the stage 4 lockdown.
Oh, you were
I was always
too?
in the worst spot during COVID.
Jesus.
The worst spot, I was there.
I've got to get you out of here very quickly.
Yeah.
But no, in Sydney, so it started in Liverpool. We then had the town hall event where I ended up speaking at it, and then they expanded it. They built a strike force in the police, and then they expanded it to the 12 council areas. And really, what ended it? We threw everything at this to try and end it. What ended it was one hot day at the end of the year when you had the Western Sydney suburbs locked down, and the eastern suburbs, everyone was out at the beach, even though they were told not to, and no one was wearing a mask. That was what ended it, because Brad Hazzard, no one was listening to him as the health minister. And it's so funny, we forget these things.
Well, it's the power of the people. We don't realise how much power we've got. And your government should be terrified of the people. That's how it should be.
That's how it should be, yeah.
Yeah, non-compliance.
Yeah.
Well, they are. That's why they're so terrified of riots. The worst thing that most governments say could happen is public disorder. And that's something that surprised me, because speaking of Rotherham, that's probably the example of worst-case scenario, where you end up with hundreds, thousands of rapes. That's a worst-case scenario, but it's not. Instead, some broken windows, be it the COVID riots or others. Even what we had with BLM in any country outside the US wasn't that extreme. But that's seen as the worst-case scenario compared to the mass rapes that we were seeing, the gang rapes.
Yeah, and that's what I'm really concerned about. It's this whole thing of all cultures are equal, and the idea. There goes the aircon. It's the idea that the all cultures are equal. It's complete crap. It's complete crap, because that is exactly the sort of mentality that enabled the Pakistani rape gangs that we saw, the Muslim rape gangs that we saw.
Yep.
And Moe, we've talked about this, because there are a lot of Muslims in the West. They're like, no, we want economic, sovereignty. We pay our taxes. We just want a stable place where our kids can go to school. What we can't have is to tar all Muslims, especially the good ones in the West that are grandfathered in, with third world Muslims, often from Pakistan in that case, and then say, oh, well, therefore, let's just. And this is where the white nationalist thing comes into it.
Yeah.
They're like, correlation equals causation. Yeah. And everyone, you will behave the way your DNA is written. It's like, no, you won't. No. That tells me that I can't learn anything new.
You just can't integrate the third world with the first world. It's common, easy maths.
Yeah.
You can't do it. Right.
Say too much.
You can call me a racist, but I mean, I'm Lebanese, Arab, Muslim, second generation, and just basic maths. You can't integrate third world people into a first world society. It won't work.
There must be certain fundamental things that make those different, whether it's attitude towards rule of law, level of education. In terms of breaking some of that down, I wonder what is that about, do you think?
It's not religion. So, unfortunately, it's immigrants. They can be Muslim, but there was an African, person attributed to be Muslim, but he wasn't. It's just their culture or tradition. These people come from they don't come from a civilized society, right? They have, very tough, atmosphere. So it's very hard to say, but we're allowing these type of people by the droves in, Apparently, according to the statistics in Australia, is like 70+% of migrants increase since 2022, right? So what's happening in Britain now, it's going to be a copy and paste in Australia if we don't watch out. Right.
When you say these people, can you be a bit more? What do you mean by these people?
Anyone from a third world country.
A third world country, Gaza?
Gaza, look, I don't want to... The Gaza thing, I do feel for the Palestinians. They're my brothers and sisters in my religion, right? These people have been, genocided. They've had the worst things happen to them. They're not going to come in and... I know, based on my religion, our religion doesn't tell us to, attack... non-combatants, etc., right? So these Muslims...
But in the West, we've had a pattern of non-combatants suffering in that way. From people from a particular background.
Yeah, well, where are they coming from?
Well, generally, as you're saying, the third world.
Well, in Gaza, what I can say is they've had a very bad situation, and to say they're all Hamas or extremists is wrong, I wouldn't say that, you know. And speaking like that does cause a lot of drift within the community. It creates a lot of sectarianism, and so it's, you know, we just have to watch what we're saying.
What was the story? So this is obviously, for those that haven't heard, Australia is accepting 3,000 Palestinians. Damien, you covered this last week.
Yeah, 2,992 visas have been issued. About 1,300 people have arrived, I think. And so they're saying they're mostly families. But, you know, it's very political, so it's hard to know exactly who's who.
The way Dutton, I just disagree his approach. Like, I'm against mass immigration altogether, right? The way Dutton went about it, singling out Muslims in Gaza, if you just put a blanket statement like, just stop everyone coming in, because there's a inflation problem in our country, housing crisis, all these things, right? To single out Muslims from Gaza is wrong. It should just be immigrants in general. If we're getting a buttload of Elon Musk's, people that can contribute to the country, it's a different story.
I think just
not that much. We don't want 3,000 South Africans, mate. Jeez.
That
was a joke?
Yeah.
That was a joke.
Just for context, I mean, the reason why he singled them out, and again, I'm no defender of Peter Dutton.
Yeah.
But just the reason why he singled them out is because Labor said, we're bringing in 3,000 of these. It's 10 times than all the other countries combined or something.
Yep.
And he's like, these people, they don't have our values, basically, because the majority of Palestinians support Hamas. That was the deduction he was making. And I think when the Labor Party started throwing it, and I agree, what you mean you couldn't find anywhere else in the world. You had to literally fly them all the way to the other side of the Pacific.
That's what doesn't make sense, right?
No,
That's what makes it kind of a virtue signal. You know, here we are doing this thing. Why are we doing this thing?
I mean, Saudi Arabia, like all the Arab countries around them, why aren't they taking them in, right?
Exactly, yeah.
That's my point, right? There's a lot of rich oil states in the Middle East, right, which are far more, again, it comes back to cultural fit.
Yep.
But we can't say that.
Well,
you know,
integration.
because we're multicultural. No, this is a different culture.
Yeah.
Right? And my ancestors, when they came from Ireland and from Lebanon, it wasn't to sort of come in and say, well, Australia has to adapt to our culture. They came in with a lot of humility, with a lot of respect. They were happy to be in a British country that had peace and security and the rule of law and parliament and all that sort of stuff that people actually respected. That's why they came here. And I don't know. I mean, argue with me if any of you guys feel differently about your immigrant parents.
Can you integrate? Do you want to integrate? And the host country has no obligation to take you. If they don't feel that you can add to their society, they shouldn't have you, just like your own home. So, you know, you go through the process. You if you are accepted, you sign up to integrate. There's a reason that you're going there. And you know, you should add value and not expect people to adapt to you if you are going to.
By the way, having lived in China for 20 years, or in Hong Kong for nearly 20 years, I can tell you the Chinese and the Japanese are not messing around with this stuff at all. It's like, you come here, you fit in.
That's
right. You don't fit in, bye-bye.
Yeah,
you know, there's no...
Exactly.
You know,
it's funny, you try to become a citizen in the UAE. They're very...
Oh, yeah.
You can't become a citizen, right? Even in Muslim countries. So if you're going to call me a racist, you know...
You have to be ethnically Chinese to be...
Correct. To be
my children were born in Hong Kong. They can never be Chinese citizens unless we can prove that my wife has like that tiny little bit of Chinese we think she might have in her heritage. And the Japan, I mean, you can become a citizen in Japan if you're not Japanese, but it's bloody hard. Like it's a real struggle. And non-Japanese looking Japanese citizens... there's a couple of European, ethnically European-looking Japanese citizens that I saw on an interview on TV once talking about their second generation in Japan.
Western countries get criticized for applying those same standards that other countries do. You know, it's really a hypocritical conversation. Western countries are not allowed to apply those same kind of criteria that other countries freely do without criticism.
And they secretly laugh at us.
Well, we deserve it in that case.
Way of the world.
That's right.
We were talking about that last week, weren't we, Paul, where we said in Vietnam and the Philippines, you're not allowed to own land unless you actually are from that country.
Even the Middle East, you can't own land.
Really?
If you buy it, you can only own in the UAE. So from what I remember, if you buy land in the UAE, you can only own it for a certain period of time, like 90 years. So you never actually own.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mo, but I heard that if you're if you're in a taxi rank in the UAE and there's an Emirati that comes up, you got to let him take that taxi. Or you're going to be in
if you
big
disrespect an Emirati, you're deported.
trouble.
There really aren't that many Emiratis that live in the Emirates. There's a tiny fraction. Numbers when I was there was about 5.5%. But the amount of welfare, and this is something that within white countries we refuse to do, is encourage fertility. It was always funny speaking with Emiratis while I was living there. Is like, oh yeah, we're hoping to have more kids so that we get a better house. I'm like, hang on, no, you have more kids, end up with a smaller house, but you can't afford it. It's the traditional way. But no, the government will provide enormous 7-bedroom villas as long as you get to 3 and 4 kids.
Exactly.
The carpet gets rolled out instead of NDIS.
They're resource rich, right? So it comes from the oil money, right?
On Dubai.
Dubai doesn't get money from oil. It's more tourism.
Oh, okay.
It's Abu Dhabi.
But it still has zero tax, right?
They've got a 5% VAT now, but on income tax, 0%.
Yeah.
Just a company tax.
Because I often think, Australia, 27 million people, got all these resources.
Yeah.
Why are we paying tax?
We're paying so much tax.
At all. You got to ask.
Make sure you don't accumulate wealth.
Starting to sound like a crazy libertarian now, but
What's that saying, Chris? You might know it. It's like if it moves, tax it. If it stops moving, subsidize it. There's a great quote on that. I'm sure people,
taxation is theft.
Taking
aside Dubai or Abu Dhabi, Dubai does have small oil resource, but Sharjah, Fujairah, Ras Al Khaimah, these other tiny emirates, they still have similar policies in this way. Because what could be more important than encouraging your next generation? Of all of this other stuff that you've got to spend money on, even defense up there, they have it right at the top of their list. And that's it. So
it's good policy.
And they put their own citizenry first. State-owned enterprises. I think if we followed the Emirati economic policy, it'd be called communist. If you see state-owned telcos, state-owned roads, state-owned everything. That's why Skype for so long, living in the Emirates, you couldn't Skype anyone because it's banned. You had to use the state-owned telecoms to do it. We'd call it absolute socialism and have some kind of funny revolt over there. They call it free market capitalism.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
I'm not a fan of state-owned industries because they typically are corrupt and non-productive. But on the other hand, the idea that you should value your own citizens, value your own country, I absolutely support. This is one of those things where we typically a lot of times, in some political circles, value the other as opposed to ourselves.
It's good in a way because pornography is not shared in the UAE. It's very hard to access. And if you use a VPN to do it, you can get caught for it still. So it does bring good. It stops bringing degeneracy to society. That's why they want to control the internet in a way. It's more done. You got to remember, it's Islamic countries that they've got Sharia law, like a watered down version of Sharia law in the UAE.
No democracy. There is no democracy.
It's not the perfect system. Islamically speaking, it's not the perfect system. It's a watered down version of Sharia law. Again, it does show its benefits in a way, as in you don't have that degeneracy. Good luck having a pride protest there. It would never happen.
No, we didn't have that degeneracy either. We had British law, and we never. It was free. It was free, but we had standards.
That's exactly how it got undermined.
Standards.
That's exactly how it got undermined. With those standards, if you look back through any British colonies history, it is exactly those principles. Let's take multiculturalism for it. Wasn't how it was described to your parents in that way. It's what they took it as. That's not what they meant when they said multicultural. They made something completely different, which is what we're seeing the implementation of now. It's one thing for what you understand the policy to be. It's another thing of what they intended to be and what they executed upon.
So you think it was a bait and switch on purpose or just an evolution?
Absolutely on purpose.
Can I ask a very stupid question? And again, you guys don't, I'm warning you ahead of time, you do not have to opine on this. But why was there the change? Because in my mind, here we go. This is going to be fun. This is why I do what I do. In my mind, the switch happened when women got the vote. Now, look, I'm not saying women shouldn't get the vote, but I think that... No. Yeah, I've got to make that obvious. But look...
Sorry, man, I'm just thinking...
No, literally, because you're watching suicide in front of you. No, but seriously, like if you look back at it, can we say that when we look at a map of America, let's take Australia out of it for a second. If all women vote, it's a blue wave. If all men vote, it's a red wave. Now, women, they cannot deny... I had this debate with an anthropologist one time, and I actually converted her on this. She was trying to make the point that, yes, Joel, women are more susceptible to socialism because they weren't given the educational opportunities. It was the men did it. So I was like, okay, all right. So men were attending the universities in the early, 1900s. Do you think that when they got the vote, that it left them more susceptible to ideas that made you think with your heart rather than your brain? She said, yes, I think that is exactly what's happened. And I'm like, well, then how do we overcome that, basically? And I do not have a good answer for that. I think that everyone deserves the right to vote because we're all imbued with the Spirit of God. I do think that women should pursue a trad life, but they should also have the option of being able to work in the workforce. So I'm not a complete tyrant, but at the same time, I can't help but see, like, we had such an amazing society. At what point was it that it opened the door to a democratically voting country to actually go down this direction? That's the big thing going through my mind, and I can't help but see that it was men that gave women the vote. But was it too early in the sense that women, they didn't quite understand at that point because, as they say, education was kept for them, and I don't see any reason why that's not true. Is that the thing? I don't know. What are your thoughts? And again, I'm spitballing. That's why I do this podcast. It's so that people can say, you know what, Joel, you're dead wrong on this. I think it's X, Y, Z. But I'm looking at the history of Australia and Western countries, and I'm just thinking, well, it's at this point where we tend to start adopting, all sorts of policies like no-fault divorce and socialist policies, and I'm just like, well, I mean, that's the only thing I can see.
I think men were pretty good at socialism too, in
yeah.
the socialist countries, and in the it's not exclusively the fault of women or because of the empowerment of women in the political and economic sphere. I think that women are, they were denied the vote for a long time. I mean, you can't say men gave women the vote because they probably should have had it all the time, or they would argue that it wasn't a great world back then for them because they did not have options. They had to be there were very defined roles that they had to undertake. And we threw the baby out with the bathwater, as you often see with cultural change. And so now everyone can choose. But if you're a woman, there's this enormous pressure to be successful at bloody everything, and it's driving women to whine, a lot of whine. It is a problem. I'm joking, but that is actually a real issue, particularly in Ireland and Australia. The wine alcoholism in women is worse than men and beer, right. And I think that a lot of that does stem from the fact that women feel so much pressure to be everything. I've got to have a successful career, I've got to be a great mother, I've got to do it all. Likewise, it's very hard for men to say, well, I want to step back now and look after the kids for a while. I maybe want to put the career on pause and all that sort of thing. Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot, but it's the contraceptive pill that changed everything because it meant that, and so the traditional Catholic view would be, that's the issue, right? That we have to get back to respecting the fact that there is a difference between the genders, and the genders are different for good reasons. They're equal but different, and those reasons exist.
And gender roles.
Yeah, and the gender roles, it's this really dangerous turf, right? But it should be a choice to a large extent. But I think there is a leaning, politically and in roles, to nurturing, to softer, Rob McMullen, who I have on my show a lot, natural law expert. You should get him on the panel down here. He's fantastic on this stuff about our
is he in Sydney,
masculine and feminine sort of thing. Well, we're in Warrnambool tonight, aren't we?
Of course we are in Warrnambool.
Of course we're in Warrnambool.
That's right.
So, I'll get him to come from Brisbane down to Victoria and come on the panel.
Excellent.
But no, I mean, he talks about, the masculine and feminine and how that plays out in politics and plays out in economics and plays out in the roles that people choose to undertake, and the West, again, it's a Western value that there's a provision of choice, that men can choose now to stay at home if they so choose, and women can be the primary worker out there. But I think to deny the natural tendency that we have to these qualities of nurturing versus these qualities of going out and being productively kind of doing stuff, you can't deny that that's embedded in our genders.
I have my own view on this. So when I grew up, I knew this. I was taught this country was an Australian, it was always Australian Christian. What's your Australian Christian name? So the religion has been, the country's sort of secularized, right? So we don't associate Christianity in Australia anymore. For me, my beliefs, which is also my religion's beliefs, there are gender roles. So the man's supposed to go to work, win the bread, and the mother's at home nurturing the children. And that sort of changed, they brought, feminism brought women's rights. Women wanted to go to the workforce. I think they did that just to get more taxes in from incomes of women.
Yeah.
So now they both have to work. And then now we're at a situation where it's inflation is so rampant, they've sort of forced women out in the workforce as well. Nobody in Australia can buy a house without, the husband and the wife going to work.
Yeah. And it
it's
didn't
so
used to
far.
be like that.
It didn't used to be like that.
Yeah.
So that's why you got low birth rates, because women can't be mothers anymore. So the government wants to sell you the solution by bringing immigration rampant, which makes things worse. The whole thing's back to front, Nature tells us that women have to be mothers and the man has to go out there and work. If they can vote, sure, they can vote. But I also think where men out there running businesses, they should have, their vote count more if it's worth 5 votes,
Right, so that's the idea of Saudi Arabia. There's a half a vote for a woman.
Possibly.
3/5. Can we have 3/5?
Business owners.
Sorry, honey.
No, but look, the reason I'm laughing and the reason we're laughing, and it's silly, it's because we can't hold these discussions anymore, and that's what they've done. And this is the problem. It's classic Jordan Peterson again. If I can't risk offending you, then we can't get anywhere as a society.
Well, also, women's role in society, and coming back to that, the mothering role, we've diminished the importance of that role. And what impact is that having on children, right? They're not being raised, probably not getting the attention they should get. We're leaving them, So you've got people going out and working economically because they have to. You've got to have a 2-income family or you can't buy a house, as Mo just said.
Yeah.
That's not good. What happened to income splitting? I mean, that was something that was around, floated around as an idea in the 80s by John Howard, and he never brought it in.
Yeah.
Right? They never brought it in. Where you could take you could take the income of one parent, and you could split it between the two and pay the tax relative to those two people so both didn't have to be working. I mean, the way the tax system is set up is anti-family.
Completely.
The whole system's anti-family.
And that's the socialist thing. That's the Marxism coming in.
This
Anti-family.
going back to the family thing, and why did I tie it to? Because that's a cracker point you made before about in Stalinist Russia, it wasn't like a feminist nirvana where they all had the vote. It was still like early 1900s. That's a cracker point. But what my concern is going back to it. Australia is a massive umbrella of a culture. Basically, we have an Australian culture. It's the dominant culture. When Australia was great, that's what we had. We all knew that when we got in them. That's what we came,
My lucky country, we all had it.
Exactly. Now, what my worry is the male socialists at the time, they actually did want to push women in, to get the vote for that reason, because they knew that they might be more susceptible to socialism and thinking with the heart over the mind. Yep. Now, that's not to say every single woman thinks with their mind second to their heart. It's not to say that at all. But I can't help but feel that there is a clear subversion of democracy that's happened in Australia, where they've attacked our institutions. And the best way to make women less happy was to actually make them enter the workforce. Because as you rightly pointed out, if you look at it statistically, because I was from the construction industry, if you look at it statistically, my mum was one of 13. My dad was one of 7. The idea that you could have one income and raise all those kids, the moment they really helped, they didn't just give women the option to work. They pushed them into it in a big way. Like, if you want to get anywhere in the world, you have to go to university. You have to go and enter the workforce to come into your own power. They demonize men. And I can't help but feel that what that has resulted in is it's the destruction of the family unit. And then as a result, economically, as you said, then we need to get mass immigration in to make the economic numbers look right. Yep. Again, you're looking at a panel of 5 dudes. We will be getting a panel of women at some point and doing this exact topic about women and feminism, and I'm already lining the panel up. But these are the tough discussions we've got to have, and I'm really concerned about, how we ended up where we are and how do we avoid what's happened in the US and the UK.
This is a very difficult topic. It's really, I mean, there's a lot of complexity here, and there's a big difference between, feminism, whether it's first wave feminism, second wave feminism, third wave feminism, and it does seem like certain things have just gone way past some semblance of making sense. It's kind of like with racism, being non-racist was great, and then they went to anti-racism, right? There's that line from Batman: if you don't die the hero, you live long enough to become the villain. Yeah. And that's what's happened with some of these social movements. And so it's kind of when it comes to third wave feminism is completely off the rails, from my point of view. But it's a really hard and complicated subject to dissect these systems. And they are. It's a whole system of belief, system of government.
Well, third wave feminism is about the demonization of men, and anti-racism is about the demonization of the white person, right? I mean, this is where the left has moved to, right? So we've got this identity politics has shifted from seeking equality to seeking domination.
Yeah, there's. I agree that it's gone from, yes, like you say, equality to the reversal of oppression. It's not just stopping oppression, but the reversal of oppression. And
they never wanted equality. It was never about equality. That's just what everyone who listened to it took away and made them feel good and wrapped themselves in a nice little blanket. It's about equality. Oh, it's okay. We'll just have a special panel that will determine that women's wages are equal to men, but we won't have a panel that will determine men's wages are equal to women. Oh, it's about equality. It doesn't feel good. It feels good. Equality. We'll just have equality when it comes to race. Oh, but we won't investigate hate crimes against whites, but we will investigate hate crimes against the other, even though we have an Indian-born human rights commissioner who says that the stupid white bastard comment is not racist because there is not a history of privilege and power from her position, which apparently is 25% Aboriginal, 75% white. But she can't be racist because you can't be racist against privileged groups. That's what our Human Rights Commission is. It's about equality. Wrap yourself up in whatever feels good and tell the other side that just to get your agendas over the line. That's politics. That's the politics of power. That's called getting things done.
Yeah, there's no symmetry. It's only looked at it's applied one way, but if you flip it around, it's not applied.
How are you winning if it's symmetry? What, you're going to give points to everyone like gold stars? This is politics.
No, yeah, right. Oh, I mean, that's the practical exercise of power.
Yeah.
But if you're going to check whether it's an honest conversation about values, you should be able to have symmetry and say, okay, we're applying it this way. And if we flip it around, the values are applied equally. But that's how you know it's actually not an honest argument.
Honest politics, yeah. Where's this?
So, I mean, that's a point, right? What are you saying, Chris? Are you saying that we oughtn't be trying to be that considerate and nice and balanced, and we should start?
Do you want to win,
winning,
or do you want to be good according to your values?
I'd like to think I could do both.
Tell me about all these people who have done that. Barack Obama, was he able to do that?
Do what?
Taft. Andrew Jackson.
Barack Obama was not a
Tony Blair.
nice person.
Take any of these people who got their agendas done. Would any of us look back on them and say, were they good, or did they deliver for their people? Did they deliver for their interests? Did they deliver for their group?
Yeah.
Now, you can say that was wrong, and in hindsight, absolutely. We can talk about some conquistadors, some Pizarros. We can talk about some Andrew Jackson. We can talk about all of these Governor Macquaries and say, oh, well, we can look back on that. Do you want to win, or do you want to be nice?
Yeah. I think generally speaking, you've got thought leaders and you've got political actors. And I think the political actors can't be puritanical about getting political outcomes. After all, at the end of the day, the measure for a good politician and a bad politician is, do they execute the policy agenda that they set out to execute, that their voters put them there. But at the same time, you need thought leaders and people that can remain puritanical. I put someone like Graham Hood in that, and I'm not saying puritanical is a bad thing. I'm saying he stayed true to his values, and he is making sure that the senators that he backs, like Pauline Hanson and Malcolm Roberts and Senator Rennick, do what they are saying they're going to do.
The Pauline Hanson with the Israeli flag in the Senate chamber, was that the one?
Yeah, that Pauline
That's the
Hanson.
one.
You talked about those stats that if all black women voted, the entire US would go 198% blue, and if all white men voted, it'd go the other way. We don't have any women here to talk about that. But Moe, I want to ask you a question.
Yep.
Do you favour corporal punishment for theft, like chop someone's hand off?
For theft, what kind of theft are we talking about?
Call it a car. Let's go with that.
Yes.
Oh, there you go. Okay. All right. Chop their hands off. All right. That didn't work because I'm going to say 88% of Pakistan would say yes, chop their hands off.
At the same time, though, I want to go back to it. So theft for stealing a car. So
hands.
When it goes
just
back,
one.
When you go back to hands, just one. Yeah.
All right. What about a finger?
When it goes back to Sharia law, it takes the person's position into consideration. Are they a poor person stealing a loaf of bread? You don't chop their hand off. If it's a person running like a ring of illegal cars, stealing cars and selling them, sure. This is debated in Sharia law.
Cheat on your wife, stone him to death.
I don't believe that's actually a law in Sharia law.
Still, 89% of the quarter billion people living in Pakistan would support that. And that's where individuals such as you have morality, but groups are sheer force, political force, physical force, or another. If you want to leave Islam, we're looking at Egypt, 86%. We'd say, off with the head. Palestinian territories. That's why we look at somewhere like Gaza and say when it's 89% there, when that number is 89% of the people living in the Palestinian territories would support death for apostasy. Well, okay, let's take a moment. That's a big deal.
Yep.
So you may not support death for apostasy. I don't know.
No, if it's Sharia law, I'd support it. I'm not watering down my religion. But again, when it comes to capital punishment...
But you support death for leaving Islam?
Whatever Sharia law says it is, I support it 100%.
So, Mo, how do you...
That's my religion, but that's not being implemented in Australia. If there was an Islamic proper country, a caliphate, which doesn't exist today, I have to support it as a Muslim.
But would you want it as Australian law?
What's that?
Would you want that as Australian law?
No,
okay.
No, definitely not. I've got this dual loyalty. I'm Australian. Out of God's wisdom, I'm born in Australia. I've got that loyalty to Australia. I'm a minority. Muslims are 0.5%, if that. So I wouldn't want to impose what my religion beliefs are onto the rest. It makes no sense to do that. And it's disrespectful. We have our own way of life, and I'd want that for my own people back in our home countries. And I'd say today, there is no proper Islamic country today. They take Sharia law and they over-apply it on a certain group. They don't apply it correctly. These capital punishments our religion have, there's a whole court process he has to go through. Example, adultery. Adultery has to be witnessed by 3 or 4 people. And a witness from a woman, you need double the witnesses.
Doesn't here.
You know?
It doesn't have to be witnessed by anyone here.
Yeah.
You can just...
In what scenario...
Any sort of sexual crime here could just be
and put it on
someone
OnlyFans.
just says,
I'm
being facetious. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. In what scenario where 3 people are going to witness adultery, go to a court and give in their statement, you have to do it out in public to get 3 witnesses.
I was going to say, what are they doing looking?
Yeah, exactly. to get the stoning of death, whatever the punishment, it's actually 80 lashes, not the stoning of death. That was the Prophet applying a law from the Jewish text at the time. I'm not going to, back that. I have to go back to the scholars, but I know it's the 80 lashes. It's lashing. So you have to get 3 witnesses, which it won't happen. You have to be doing sex in public. So it's more of a deterrent. That's why the capital punishment is there. Because if you had people having sex in public, I mean, it's...
What you've got is a system of law in Sharia law that's evolved from a culture and a religion, right? And that's appropriate in countries that have that culture and that religion.
Yeah, the UAE have it there as well. I mean,
And our culture, and this is where it gets, you got to look at religion as the basis, or we can't say Australia is not a Christian country.
It
right?
is.
It might be secular now because people don't practice. The reality is that our law, comes from a Christian and ultimately Judeo-Christian background, but with Christian overlay, right? The concept of forgiveness is very much a Christian concept because it wasn't present as much in the Torah.
Yeah,
so, it was Jesus that came along and said, "Well, actually, no, we're going to do forgiveness, we're going to do redemption, we're going to do all this stuff." It took it to a different level, and our laws, not I mean, as I said, in a Muslim country, it's Muslim laws, and that's how it should be. But
Sharia law tells us to respect the laws of the country we're going to live in. So I think that's
as long as they're a minority, or I mean, because you're saying
that's right.
You were saying as long as you're a minority, but if you're a majority of some areas,
I don't know how that will happen.
Rotherham, Luton are these areas where that becomes a majority culture.
The country. So the country's laws. I'm not advocating for any kind of conquering.
No, this is the problem, Chris. Right? It's not happening. It's that same issue. I think that was Sam Harris on that original. You ever see that clip of Sam Harris and Ben Affleck? Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
And it was like Sam's sort of saying, that you've got these concentric circles of different levels of acceptance of like, immigrants like. Well, you're not an immigrant, Mo, you're born here, but your parents or your family and your way of looking at it, right? That yes, we practice our religion here, but we understand we're living in a Christian country, so we respect the Christian-based laws and the evolution of the British legal system.
Yep.
But how do you integrate?
Then you have other different groups, like the extremist Islamist Pakistanis in the UK, I guess, or I don't know much about it.
It's more
so
tradition. It's more tradition than religion. It's more tradition overriding religion, and
is it right?
It's you got to admit these people are brought up in a certain mindset, hive mind, and you bring that here, it's going to create a mess.
How is it here? Like as a Muslim Aussie,
I love it.
No, I mean as a Muslim Aussie looking at the Muslim community in Australia.
Yep.
Do you see those concentric circles, those different groups, or do you?
No.
What do you reckon?
Everyone there's no in my circle in Western Sydney. No one has that extremist mindset. Islam is very compatible with Australian values. Like that statement, we've got no problem with that.
But I've heard some pretty rough stuff coming out of some of the imams, and
I mean, when it comes to politics back at home,
here. Are people cry for jihad? Are people desire jihad? Are people die for jihad? That's Auburn, the Auburn Islamics. And
jihad just means struggle. Jihad, I've got an internal struggle. Me abiding by not doing adultery, not committing sin is a form of struggle. Not sleeping around is a form of jihad. It's an internal jihad. So the word jihad just means struggle. So again, we have people that are not Arabic speaking or not Muslim or have never studied our religion from the beginning. Take these words and make it look like jihad means to kill. It not necessarily, no. It just means to struggle.
Can I just say, Moe, and I respect this about Islam, that you guys have a huge respect and almost a chain of command when it comes to spirituality with regards to those of the Muslim faith in the different levels. And I totally respect you're not in any position to actually talk on the faith. But at some point, just like with the female topic, I will be getting some actual imams that come in with some of the opposite side.
Sorry, Mo, I probably threw a question at you there. No,
no. I want to keep going down that for a second because I think there's something important here. And the whole reason why I wanted to get a diverse panel religiously but also ethnically is because we've got to work this out. Because if we don't work this out, we're going to look like the UK. And tribalism is going to take over. And you know what the worst part out of all of it? There are people like Tommy Robinson, like Majid Nawaz on the opposite sides, and they're not talking to each other. And they were on the same side when it came to the COVID stuff, the vaccine stuff, but now they're like at opposite sides of this.
Are they?
Right, yeah, they are. And they're not talking. And so when I see that, I'm like, I'm very protective of what we have here. And I'm trying to work out how do we articulate what this is. We clearly have stuff in common. How is it that we can safeguard Australia and our movement and everything that we're doing so that we don't go the way of the US or the UK with this stuff? And so I did want to ask you on this particular topic, Moe, if Australia becomes a majority Islamic country in terms of the population, it sounds like you'd support the change of the laws to be more aligned to Sharia law. But aren't you a bit concerned that in the event that happens, Australia will not look like the country that you grew up in?
I don't like to answer what if questions because that's very.
But you've said 50%. If it goes 50%, then you'd support the changing of the laws fundamentally. I mean, the Australia you grew up with, What made it great wasn't the cutting off of
No, I
hands.
said we're 0.5%. We're a very small minority.
Yeah.
In Australia with 50+% Muslims, I mean, you're doing pretty good, preaching the religion. I don't like to answer what if questions. It's very, at that level when you have 50+% Muslims, and God knows how the country would, look like, or what people actually want from within,
This is my concern. In the first 15 minutes, we've been talking about the values that make Australia great. And I truly believe that Sharia law is contrary to that. I truly think that if we go that way, it's going to become like Lebanon.
Yeah.
It's going to become like Syria. And don't get me wrong, there are outside influences that are destroying those countries.
Yeah.
But the reason why we went to these protests and often we came across similarly valued people is because we came from places that turned to crap for whatever reason.
Yep.
And I'm really worried that this blip in history we have in Australia down under, we will lose if we don't define what the hell
my
this
message
is.
will be to like the Muslims, the Muslim collective. I'm against putting Sharia law in the West. If you want to show Muslims what Sharia law is and show it's a benefit to society, let's do it back at home. I mean, they brought down the Ottoman Empire, which was a legitimate caliphate. If we still had that, there's no Muslim country today that's implementing Sharia law and Islamic teachings for it to look good in front of the West, right? They've got monarchies in place like Saudi Arabia, which our religion is against. They're implementing it wrong. I'm all for bringing it back at home. Make it look, it's about Sharia law it's similar to capitalism, right? Small government, it looks after, small business. It prevents degeneracy, things like that, right? It's very conservative and traditional. So if you bring that back in the Middle East, but there's another, outside external factors. They don't want an Islamic, awakening in the Middle East because the global financial system's at risk. It's a threat to all of that because in Islam, interest is prohibited. Usury is prohibited. And it's a threat to that.
You mentioned 0.5%. Australia is close to 3% of Islamic faith. And in New South Wales, it's closer to 5%.
Okay.
And if we take age into it, so if we just take people below the age of 40, in Sydney, you're looking at closer to double digits.
Okay.
And that number just keeps on continuing to rise to the point where you get to the total of Lakemba, for example, and including Auburn, you're looking at closer to 68%.
I'm Muslim.
So 0.5, I just needed to correct those numbers because it's not.
I'm saying as a country, Australia, what are we, 0.5% Muslim? That's what I was trying to say.
3. 3 of Australia, close to 5 of New South Wales.
Okay.
And again, if you make that close to Sydney of under the age of 50, so retired people don't really participate in too much, you're looking much beyond double digits, and again, 60+% through most of those areas. So this is no longer something that we can think. Those numbers of 0.5% was more Damien's parents' kind of question. We're looking at very different ones where you're looking at tomorrow, Muslim Votes Matters in Brunswick, Victoria, will be hosting its first its launch.
That's right. And I do want to get into this. And by the way, guys, this isn't meant to be a is Islam compatible with Australia discussion. We literally had the Aboriginal issue worn as a face mask last year, where they tried to fundamentally change our constitution so that there'd be a third chamber. Like, they want us to have more than one flag. Like, there are multiple angles I'm worried about on this, and I'm trying to really define what we're dealing with. But going back to this, Damien, you covered this issue, I think, a couple months ago. This is from the Muslim Votes Matters group, which is a group which actually is trying to lobby the Muslim vote. They're trying to get them to see their strength in numbers. They have a list on their website of the top Muslim areas in terms of the most populous Muslim areas. The top of it is, I think 50% of Australia's Muslims are in New South Wales, by the way. 31.7% are in Blaxland under Jason Clare. Immigration Minister Tony Burke, 25% are in Watson of his seat. Funny, because he might be trying to reject Candace Owens' visa, but I think there's a lot of Muslims, Moe, right, that would probably want to keep Candace Owens coming in. And isn't that funny? Isn't that funny that... So what the idea is basically helping Muslims to see that these are the issues that face them, and these are the groups that we might get behind. But there's another group as well that they're trying to actually get behind, and it's called the Muslim Vote Matters. The Muslim Vote group. Sorry, they all sound very similar. The Muslim Vote group is basically going to field candidates. Now, Moe, you saw this recently. What was your gut reaction when you saw this group out there?
I always want to watch out how they want to convey the masses. Like the Muslim community, I mean, they stitched us up during COVID, bringing vaccination clinics in mosques, you know. So I recommend every Muslim to do their due diligence and look at who's actually behind these organizations and telling you which way to vote. I want to keep it simple for the Muslims to understand. If you vote Labour, you vote Greens, you're voting for every policy that goes against our religious values. They support LGBT, all these things, right? Keep the foreign policy aside. Australia has no say when it comes to foreign policy. I mean, we can just make a statement, that's about it. I think we should, it shouldn't just be a Muslim vote matters. Let's think outside of the box. Let's have people of religion uniting together, you know, a religious voice, like Christians, Muslims, even Jews. If they have the same views as us, the you know, family, the freedom of speech, all these things, you know, we should unite based on that.
Yeah, every election I come out with a sorry for hogging the mic, guys, but it is my podcast. Every election I come out with a election matrix, which shows you the parties and where they stand on things. I suspect, and again, this isn't an allegation, but this is what my gut feeling is saying, and time reveals everything. My gut feeling is that a lot of these Muslim candidates they filled in these seats, they're going to have a lot in common, as we spoke about, Moe, with the Greens Party and the Teals Party. They support Aboriginal matters, they support the climate agenda, but the only policy they run on is, do you support Palestine? And that, my friend, is a
dangerous,
huge lie, isn't it?
It's a huge lie.
And that's what I'm really worried about. But Damien, sorry.
I would just say that it's identity politics, right? I mean, it's basically saying you're this, and this is where it gets a bit murky for me, because it's like probably religion is the one identity factor that does impact values, right? And would impact your political stance, as opposed to nationality or race or anything else. It gets a little confusing. So in a sense, it's identity politics. Then again, as a Catholic, I would say I want my values and my religion, like you would, Mo, to inform my decision. So it gets a bit tricky, right? Because it's like, well, should we have a Catholic bloc? Now, if you've been to a Catholic church lately, you would know well that it's very politically divided. Yeah. Okay, we have real extremes in the Catholic Church. I mean, you know, there's very conservative Catholics, and there's really quite extreme left force in the Catholic Church these days. Probably not so much in the Lebanese Maronite Church, but certainly in the Irish, Italian Catholic, traditional Catholic Australian sort of church. So, you know, politics affects religion to a certain extent. I'm going around in circles. I'm not making any sense because I'm not clear on this. This is hard.
Do you want your religion to have political power and force and presence? Do you want your religion to have the political force and power and presence in your community, in your state, and in your nation that you live?
I want the concepts of Christianity to have some impact. I like, yeah, I don't like
you want those
cutting
concepts
people's
to be
hands off and that sort of thing for crime. So I have a different.
If you don't want that, you'll need political power. It's that simple.
Right.
If you don't want something contrary to your people's views, to your faith, your own religion, to exist for your children, you would need political power.
Right. Ethically, I would feel okay about standing up in Parliament saying, this is what I believe. This is what I want to fight for. And can't we have that? Can't we have some respect for the other side to a certain extent, or do
on a panel like this, you can, but not in a chamber.
No, but I mean, in a chamber, isn't that what we're supposed to do? Isn't that why we have a parliament? So we're not having a war.
When has that ever existed inside a political chamber? I don't know when this hand holding of Deacon or Barton ever existed. They were at their wits' end. Protestant Catholic. The same thing with the politics there. It has always been a political deathmatch to the end to get trade. There was a free trade party to get trade barriers removed. White Australia policy, that was a huge issue for multiple different to wedge people. All of these different things were a political deathmatch to get your people over the line. It always has been.
Right.
There has been no kumbaya. And if there has been, please tell me about these kumbayas happening in which parliament, in which house of governance, when you're talking about 100 million votes, are people holding hands and saying, oh, yes, let's just have respect for the Congress Party in India. BJP's not that bad.
Yeah, okay, all right. But, okay, so what do we do? Are you saying that we need to now be very, very, very forceful with our conservative views?
No, your representatives need to be the one fighting that fight. It's not in this panel. We're all going to start ripping our ears off and start going at each. It's about
Well, the Liberal Party aren't representing me.
Exactly.
Right? They're not representing you. They're not representing... Who the hell are they representing? They're not representing any kind of conservative values.
If Pauline Hanson just, had an open dialogue with Muslims, because I believe there's a lot in common with Christians and Muslims.
There is with conservative Christians and Muslims. I mean, you and I, Mo, would agree on 90% of stuff, right?
Let's put that forward, If that's a big step forward. If we can get the freedom parties and the Muslim to work together based on conservative values, that's a big step forward.
Yeah, and that's the big problem we've got, isn't it? We need an overarching sort of these are the playing rules that we're working with essentially. But politics is the art of working with people of like-minded interests on certain bills. You won't agree on 90% of things, but if there's one thing I know about a guy like Moe, he agrees with 90% of the things on my policy matrix. 90%.
Well, Chris would say, I mean, what would you say that it's there's going to be conflict? Obviously, it's a power struggle, so it's a game theory type situation. I mean, politics is the art of compromise. We hear that, right? But you would say it's not the art of compromise, right?
No.
Or it's the art of accepting the other guy's got more power than you and you just need to suck it up.
Politics is about winning. If you're not winning, you're losing. It's simply that in a matrix. Once you're in that chamber, what we do here outside of that when it comes to influence is something we can discuss and maybe a little bit of this and maybe mix or whatever it is. Once you're in the chamber, your bill wins or loses. It's that simple. It is that simple when it comes to quotas. It's that simple when it comes to tax. It's that simple when it comes to does your pre-selection succeed or fail. It is dead simple. There is no middle ground.
There is naked power inside the chamber, but on the other hand, when it comes to becoming elected, you try to sell things based on values. Now, a lot of times people don't, in the chamber, represent the values that they say they're representing. But, values is part of the salesmanship job to get in the chamber, is it not?
No one who was elected a Greens politician would have gone to their campaign on the issue of Palestine. Now it becomes serious once they're in there. Once they're in the chamber, they can move that around. This is the same. Pauline didn't wear an Israeli flag on her last campaign trail. No, not at all. Only once it became an issue. That's where you build up the political capital, and once you're in there, then you can spend it on the causes that you choose to.
But if you're found by your constituents not to be consistent in that regard, they should, if we have a representative democracy, which we may not in some cases, throw you out.
Overwhelmingly, the Australian people have been against immigration for decades, yet here we are today. Overwhelmingly. We're talking about 60, 70%, yet you just play off from one side to the other. Maybe it's about negative gearing. You're like, flip the table over negative gearing, flip the table over carbon tax, flip the table over all these irrelevant issues.
That's very true. The Conservatives in the UK have not at all been represented by their elected representatives, and actually Labour and the working families either. So that part's clearly...
It brings us back to that disconnect thing, though, doesn't it? Because it's like the 70-30, 70-30 that voted outside of Canberra against the voice, and the 70-30 that voted for the voice inside Canberra. Yeah. Right? Do we need any clearer indication of how detached our ruling class are from the people than
That's
that?
a good point.
Well,
ruling
that is
class
profound.
What it told me, and I said it on the night, not only did I predict the result and I predicted how many wouldn't vote, but I actually said every Liberal Party...
Are you being modest again?
No, yeah, we can't have that. We cannot have that. But
You've been hanging around with that Greek friend of ours.
No, yeah, we won't say his name. We won't say his name. But you need to remind them of these things, because if some schmuck like me can actually predict the result, and I have no history of learning it, what the hell are the Liberal Party consultants doing? I mean,
Managing the narrative.
Literally, I mean, they were slow. They were slow. They even waited till it was safe, and Jacinta Price had gone against the Voice. Then they opposed the Voice. And then when it was safe, you know, did the Queensland Liberal Party say, oh yeah, now we oppose treaties after the vote? It's like, where was your leadership? You know, almost 80%, 70-80% of your state was against the Voice.
Sorry, did you say you want leadership from the Queensland Liberal Party?
Yeah. Looking forward to that state election.
They are trying to lead, but against the interest of their constituents.
100%. And I think in answering Chris's question, I think that fundamentally what it comes down to is there is a mechanism problem where our side does not know the rules of engagement. Great line from the Bible, my people suffer because of their lack of knowledge. I think that's what's going on. If we knew the rules, and that's why I exist, the Turning Point Australia, How to Vote cards and the policy matrix, it's about bringing greater transparency to the political process. That's a Jordan Peterson move. It's about bringing greater transparency to the political process so that we can better understand exactly who's standing for what. Are they actually in my interests or not? Or are they just a front for the Greens, you know, this Muslim Vote Matters group or not? And that's all that we can really do. I'm really conscious of time. Is it a hard finish, 7? Or it's not a hard finish? But yeah, I mean, this is not an easy discussion, and it's definitely one that
very complicated.
Yeah, and it's one we need
more to
part 2
unpack.
for. No, 100%. And now look, going back to it though, we've got to work out what the hell it means to be an Australian. Because they left us in a bit of a limbo. We had just had COVID. Aussies are dobbing each other in. You know, that whole thing about what's fair income and not is out the door. We've lost all semblance of the Aussies that, you know, were on light horsemen or in the trenches or on the beaches of Gallipoli. And to make matters worse, we've done the leader of our country on 35% of the vote. He's just failed with the Voice referendum, yet he's still ramming this thing through. And it's like, well, what is an Aussie? Who actually has my back? And I think that's why we're in a bit of a limbo right now in Australia. But I do have a lot of faith. I mean, I think we're much better positioned than the other Five Eyes countries.
I don't.
No?
I think America's much better positioned
Why is that?
because they have a conservative voice. They have balance.
They don't have-
It might be polarized, but it's balanced polarized.
Right.
This country, and this is Canada with sunshine.
Yeah.
You know, we're that much closer to a UK riot situation than America is.
You reckon?
Oh, absolutely,
I
absolutely.
think-
there are so many angry. I don't know Mo, about the Western Sydney community, but I reckon you go to the outer suburbs of Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, Melbourne. Maybe you're not getting. There's no sense of representation for a tradie, the working class Aussie, especially men. Right? Men are demonized. I mean, you have to go away and live away for 20 years and come back. I mean, you might have that perspective. I came back to Australia and I just thought, this country hates men.
Oh, yeah.
This culture is the most anti-male culture I've ever seen. Like, it's disgusting. And men, sorry blokes, but, you know, we've lost the plot a bit. Like, we're all pretty wimpy.
Yep, we are.
And I don't know whether that's got to do with the testosterone levels. Jordan Peterson might know more about that.
Absolutely.
But,
in the
you know,
water.
it's in the water, it's in the food, it's in everything. Conspiracy theory.
And in the frog scat.
The element of truth in every conspiracy theory, perhaps. But it is definitely psychologically there. And it's a crisis, man, of massive, massive proportions. The rates of male suicide of men my age, it is unacceptable. And we don't even talk about it.
No.
You know, we sit there and we talk about every single women's issue there is under the sun until we're blue in the face. And we don't talk about this glaring 3,000 men a year taking their own lives. You have a damn sick culture when that's going on.
Oh, yeah.
There is something seriously wrong with this country.
Is it true?
And we don't talk about it. We
There's
have no
not.
comment.
There's not one domestic violence organisation for men. Isn't that true?
I don't know. I honestly don't know, but I do know that there's just massive injustice in family law against men. The presumption of innocence is at serious, serious risk. And we have to fix it. And men need to speak up in this country, but they're all terrified. We are that far from, I mean, you won't be able to speak up soon, right? It's going to get, I mean, it's bad enough for women who speak up for men like Bettina Arndt or Daisy Cousins or Sydney Watson or, you know, I mean, there's probably many other women that I can't think of that are probably doing a good job there too. But they get just hammered. And the radical feminist movement in this country is awful. Like, these people are horrible.
Yeah.
The mad effing witches. I mean, that mob online, there's some of the stuff, the way they post stuff, and what they said about Bettina Arndt's conference because she wants to do a thing on presumption of innocence. And it's like, you know, oh, we're going to take it down. We're going to have it moved from the venue. They had that done. You know, let's get together and shut it down. But it's just expletive, sweary, revolting mentality, like of just hideous hatred, misandry, vile, revolting. I wasn't a first wave or second wave feminist in the 80s to fight for that crap.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I was supporting women's rights, but I would never. They are not the people that represent the sort of equality that I was fighting for as a naive 20-something. And I think we've got to do something about this stuff, because if men don't rise up and stand up and start to fight for their rights in the workplace, I mean, I know it's risky, but we're going to have to stick our neck out, blokes. Yeah. I mean, we can't keep going on like this. You are going to have to be the first guy at work that says...
The she'll be right attitude is, you know, Aussies, she'll be right. They've always got this thing. You know, like you said with Canada, I think we've actually got it worse than Canada. I just look at policies. When you go to Canada, as bad as it is, at least they got Pierre on the other side.
Oh, Pierre Polyev.
He's
absolutely
10 times better than Dutton.
10 times. Well, let's be fair to Peter Dutton for 1 second. I think he's trying, but that party has been infiltrated.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a member for like 5 minutes, and I saw it immediately.
Yeah.
Like it's an absolutely left-wing infiltrated party. Yeah. I went to like community. What do they call them? What are the suburban?
What do they call them? Branch
meeting.
Yeah, branch.
They did one branch meeting. They spent the whole meeting talking about liberal, not about Australia or Queensland or anything. It's about the rules of the Liberal Party. And there were all these young women from university-age women sitting there, like talking about, you know, we have to have better sexual harassment rules within the party. It's like,
But you stayed in the room,
sorry,
right?
the country's falling to bits.
You stayed in the room.
This is before I became enlightened, Chris.
Oh, okay. because
I just come back from Australia, to Australia from 20 years away. I had to be a little bit cool.
this is what I want to make clear is, if you're not in the room, you don't have a voice. When it goes for the Liberal Party, it goes to the Labor Party as well. There used to be a right wing of the... Any Santa Maria fans around? There used to be a right wing of the Labor Party. They left. Men left. And I would actually say, rather than men, or you can't have a say, and they're not talking, there's too much talking with men. They're not doing. And I actually don't think mad witches are revolting at all. They're effective. They work. They fundraise. They activate. Okay. They get things done. They post, they share, they generate content, they do. They create apps. They fundraise hundreds of thousands of dollars for apps for like-minded businesses. They hire their friends. And this is the biggest strength the right has, is because they're capitalist, they have skills. Most of the left don't have skills. So they don't. I'm sorry, they generally don't. And
they have time.
They have time. They do have creativity, right? But on the right, what you can do is hire each other. And that's what the individualist right is, what's torn itself apart, where everyone, unfortunately, is just looking at each other going, oh, how can I find my place in a sinking ship hierarchy? So I've got a huge respect for MFW, huge respect, because they continue to cancel, take scalps, and hang them on their wall and say, look who we scalped.
Yeah, we're not organised.
Yeah,
we're not organised.
No, we're not filthy. We're not willing to. They will get blood on their teeth and say, "Look at this," like a Native American tribe. Look at this scalp.
The head of Donald Trump in my hand.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah,
that's winning.
They show up. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, no, the feminists. You know, again, I stacked this panel so that we could talk about immigration policy and values.
Immigration policy.
But, can you define immigration?
Immigration. What did you see at the RNC? Mass deportations now. The debate on the right is no longer about immigration policy. This is about deportations now. What do we see the rights in the UK about? Deportations now. The debate is mass deportation. Immigration policy is where it is. Not about immigration policy. That's the goal with the right, to move that Overton window. There's a housing crisis in every single one of these Western countries debating about what the immigration policy is. Not about immigration. Not even net zero is now kind of centrist. Mass deportations now. You saw the signs.
Well, that's specifically for the people who have immigrated illegally across the border. I mean, what was it, 10 million or something along those lines in the U.S.? Yep. But I mean, that's yeah. That is. Let's confine what they're talking about to the wave of illegal immigration that has happened in the last
There's about 130 people outside of Tony Burke's office, 24/7 sleeping there. There's probably about 70 in Melbourne right now. They are willfully overstayed their visa. Is that an illegal immigrant? Because that's where the debate is in Australia, where you're seeing mass protests which are growing all the time. You're seeing hundreds of people camping out, holding protests because they've overstayed their visa and they demand a permanent visa.
I was talking about the U.S. You said
I'm talking about Australia.
Yeah, but I thought you were just talking about the U.S. But
Right, this is happening in Australia. This is happening in the UK. This is happening everywhere. This is not some far-off issue like the trans issue or something. This is here.
oh, definitely. I mean, it's an enormously consequential issue in terms of who you let in, why you let them in, whether or not they can integrate, they want to integrate, whether or not they'll benefit the society that they're coming into. I mean, and whether or not they can vote, even though they're not citizens. It's an enormous issue.
No, the debate isn't about any of that. It's purely numbers. Numbers out. That's it. That is purely where for the right this is. It's not about integration or anything like that. If you've overstayed, out, Emirati style. You've got 30 days to get out. If you
100% for it.
Yep.
I'm for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's how is that different than what I was talking about?
It's not about integration. It's not about whether you can move out. It's purely numbers out, housing crisis.
Yeah,
So he's talking about strategy. That's what he's talking about. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So I hear what you're saying.
Integration. We're not even going to add
In terms of your immigration policy, these
Immigration.
things, I-M policy.
And I'm talking about emigration.
Yes, I understand. Which is if you're not legally allowed to be here, you should be emigrated, right?
Gents, can you do me a favor? I'm an idiot. I need you to define these for me. Sure. Now, look, I've got the definitions on. I even searched this before the show. I didn't get it. And if I don't get it, usually my audience gets it, but I know there's a lot of people that are with me. Emigrate means you're exiting your current homeland, whereas immigrate with an I means you're coming into a country to live.
Right.
Is one just, leaving and one coming? Is
Out.
One's coming and one's going.
Yeah,
in.
that's my understanding.
Okay, all right. See, it's because it's
And they also
T and I.
sound a little similar.
Exactly,
For a while, I
yeah.
wasn't sure actually which thing we were saying.
Yes.
Same.
Yes. So why are you highlighting emigrate with
Out.
an E?
Because that's where for the right. Again, RNC, sign said mass deportations now. We just capped students. We are going to see 100,000 students who are currently living in Australia struggle to get their student visas renewed. They will need to be emigrated.
Right.
This is where we will be, is what the emigration policy is. What do we do when we have 570 to 230? These numbers are being we're not exactly clear, but this is now an emigration policy when you set these student caps. And that's where the debate is. That's why you're seeing hundreds of people protesting, that camping out, expecting to stay. This is now an emigration debate as much as it is immigration.
Right. Do we get rid of them? You mean, like, do we emigrate them, get them out?
Isn't in the U.S. the largest numbers are illegal immigration, right? And the calls for mass deportations is to take a number of those people and bring them back to where they came from. In Australia, the big numbers are actually legal immigrants, aren't they? Whereas the people who are staying illegally is a much smaller percentage of that, is it not?
If you have overstayed your student visa, you are an illegal
Oh, I understand.
immigrant.
But in terms of what has a big impact, like for instance the housing crisis here in Australia, isn't that a consequence of large numbers of legal immigration due to policy, as opposed to just leaving a border open and allowing millions of people to come in?
And if they've overstayed those legal immigration policies, they are now illegal immigrants.
Oh, I understand.
And that can't be
Right.
we're looking at this. Because they haven't walked across the border, they're a legal immigrant.
No, that's not at all what I'm saying. In terms of number, because numbers have impact. The larger impact in the U.S. is illegal immigration, and here is not the problem the policy that allows large numbers of legal immigration at a time to boost certain numbers of GDP and that kind of thing, creating the housing crisis. Isn't the people who stay here illegally a much smaller percentage of the legal immigration? That's what I'm saying.
But it's about to, with the student cap, as I was saying, about to become an illegal immigrant problem, because these people would not want to.
I understand.
How do you do with the student cap?
But I'm just
You've just
quantifying
boosted
it. How many people are a percentage of this as a percentage of the legal immigration? Shouldn't the focus of the debate be about the quantity of legal immigration, because that is by far the biggest contributor?
You've got 570 to 680 right now. How do you get that? How do you get that down? Like, how are you going to convince tens of thousands of students that they have no path to renew and continue to study? They have no path to temporary. How do you see what I mean?
No,
and you're getting how this has just become.
No, I do, but I think with respect, you're missing what Paul's saying. Now, look, Paul, in Australia, absolutely, we have a legal immigration problem, 100%. We've got control of our borders to our credit, and thanks to Tony Abbott. We do have every now and then the odd boat that comes, but it's a legal immigration problem. So not only do we have people that, yep, we're bringing in at record rates, hundreds of thousands every year, but on top of that, what Chris is pointing out is the fact that we're literally about to change the definition of all these students, and how do we get rid of them? How do we get rid of them? It's a great question. Sorry, I can see Damien. You're looking at
Elon Musk tweeted today. Actually, it just reminded me when you guys were talking. He tweeted a tweet from retweeted a tweet from Kamala Harris, or re-X'd an X. What is it now? Yeah. 2017, Kamala Harris, and Elon says, "Please note that this is an actual statement from Kamala," and Kamala Harris says, "An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal."
Okay. When was that from?
Literally.
So 2017. So the
literally breaking a law.
Was she vice president then? No, but nearly. So, you've got the vice president of the United States having on record as saying that, if you're an undocumented immigrant, you are not a criminal in the United States.
No, it is literally breaking a law.
Well, I would have thought so. Yeah, you would. Yeah, that's right.
Both of you.
It was really hard to find too, by the way. Elon Musk tweets too much.
Do you remember
he owned the same thing.
The Cuban child? Do you remember the Cuban child who came across on the boat in Florida, and there was the photo of the FBI agent reaching for him in that photo? That's when borders ended, and I think that was 1998. For the left, that's when the American border became open. You could take it even earlier than that with the Muriel boat lift. Do you remember that? The Cubans, they opened their prisons and they flooded Florida with boats. You could say the borders ended there. This is not something new. It ended for the left decades ago. The right's only just starting to catch up now.
Well, a lot of these things are a hijack of compassion, right? Basically, we take what we think is a positive impulse of people, and we basically weaponize compassion to implement or ignore laws that ultimately aren't necessarily good for the people in the country. So when it comes to the illegal immigration, or it's like, well, the call is to be compassionate, sanctuary cities. And that's also where it comes to the taking it's a Shakespearean tragedy to take someone's positive virtue, a compassion, and use it against them in terms of this kind of policy, or when it comes to certain feminist policies as well. It's an issue.
Yeah, I'm really trying to think about that Ocasio-Cortez clip. If you might remember that. What have you sent me, Chris?
We're talking about illegal immigration, and Ozpil, not less than an hour ago, who I was speaking with earlier today, is at this illegal immigration protest, and there are communists here threatening to beat him up.
Right.
This is happening now. This is not a foreign, distant kind of thing. This is a conflict.
Yeah, let me give it a play, Rami.
I'll beat you up.
I'll beat you up.
I'm out of the way. I'm on the side. No, you're not allowed to come here. You're not allowed to come here. Just leave. Yeah? Stop filming. Stop fucking filming. I'm leaving, bro. I'm walking away.
Get them out. Yep. Get them out. These guys don't belong here, honestly. And they're using Antifa tactics, aren't they, Chris? Were they? If they're umbrellas, are they
coordinated by socialist alternative white leftists?
That's right. If you look at the
what was that?
These are the protests outside in Melbourne and Sydney. You have 24/7 camps outside Tony Burke's office, and in Melbourne, I don't know who the MP is, of immigrants who have overstayed their visa, who are demanding permanent visas, not temporary, permanent visas,
right,
for all.
Yeah,
for everyone.
And if you pay close attention on many of the mics, not on this particular one, the blower that he's got there, in other videos, if you go to Ozpil, he's got these mics, and they've actually got the solidarity, the Aboriginal flag, they've got the Free Palestine stickers. What else have they got on these things, Chris?
Socialist alternative.
Socialist alternative, and it's like
hijacked all these identities.
Yeah,
exactly.
Hijack of compassion.
If that was the UAE, they'll throw them in a container and just throw them in a desert.
There you go. Effective.
It's effective.
Fang it.
Yeah. Well, as Kamala Harris would say, it's time for us to do what we have been doing.
Yes.
And that time is every day.
Amen. And also, in order to what's that quote she says, Chris? In order to
go forward.
In order to realize
What can be unburdened from what has been.
Yes. Anyway, guys, I've had a really good time doing this. This somewhat felt like directionless, but I also feel like it actually has given me a lot of food for thought, because I think we've delved into a lot of things here where it's like, I didn't think of that, I didn't think of this, and I want to continue this series on this topic another time with an interesting set of panelists as well, like you guys, to delve into this. Like, what is it that makes Australia uniquely Australian? Why is it that when we hear a story about an Aussie in Germany doing a classic Aussie thing, what is it that we know that that's him? You know, and that's what's at the back of my head, because I feel like, as I said to start this off, I feel like if we don't work this out, then it will be defined for us and answered for us, and the elites in Canberra will say it's un-Australian to not vote yes to the voice.
It's a very important question to figure out what it is that succeeds. I'm a big fan of experimentation. It's a very complex world. There are lots of different political systems out there, cultures, looking around and trying to figure out what actually is working, what is functioning, what gives you a cohesive society, what gives you destabilization. There's an old book, Wealth and Poverty of Nations by David Landis, who discusses, well, why have some countries succeeded and others haven't? Why is the English Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution, why did it happen in the UK? Jared Diamond's book, The Guns, Germs, and Steel. You know, how come, you know, we're hunter-gatherers and you have airplanes? How does that happen? You know, kind of getting back to, and sometimes you have countries, you have natural experiments. North Korea, very different than South Korea. You know, same culture, same latitude. You look at, you know, you've seen those pictures of North Korea at night, which has basically got no lights, and South Korea is lit up like a Christmas tree. You know, and so if we can, you know, try to dig into what succeeds and what doesn't, and also how cultures end up collapsing and committing basically cultural suicide because they don't know who they are and what actually, and value what it is that works. That's
Absolutely.
that question.
Gentlemen, did you have any final additions before I wrap us up?
Just, you know, I think you've got to come back to the values of peace, prosperity, freedom. And we've got to work towards those values. I think that's one way of just simply defining it. And let's evolve. Let's make Australia a great country based on some core principles that all of us can agree on and adhere to. But we have to have some principles. We can't go on with this kind of moral relativism, this endless sort of, you know, everything's equal, all cultures are the same, blah, blah, blah. You know, no. I mean, even within our religions, there are differences, and within our nationalities, there are differences, and we've got to work out, well, what do we stand for as Australians? And to do that, first thing you got to be able to do is have a conversation like this.
Yeah.
And the first thing we've got to do is stop shutting down conversations.
Definitely.
Stop keeping people like Candace Owens out of the country. And I'm really disappointed. I mean, you know, I was very pro-Israel on my show for a long time, and I'm really disappointed that, you know, with the Jewish community the left Jewish community have been so wanting to just shut the conversation down. And Candace made a really good point in the interview that we did, that this is not serving anybody's interests. This is a stupid, dumb move on their part. Because if you want to enhance conspiracy theories, that there's some Jewish conspiracy and cabal around the world, you act like that. And then people are going to, the real neo-Nazis are going to go, see, I told you. And then it becomes very hard for sensible people like us to say, yeah, you know, you're a neo-Nazi. Let's stop being a neo-Nazi. Because, you know, okay, you know, yeah, they did that.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
No, exactly.
Absolutely crazy. You know, she's scary, man. She's so scary. I was so scared this morning.
Oh, are you?
Talking to her. I hope they keep her out of the country. I'm terrified. You know.
So I'm against that.
But you know what else?
Islamophobia. You know, that same Islamophobia tactic. I'm against that victim mindset.
Yeah.
Everything deserves criticism. Everything. And you know, like I believe in my religion. The truth will come out. I'm a very peaceful person. I want to be an Australian. I want to follow the laws of the country, and I want to contribute, because I think when you ask what it is to be an Australian, when I go out there, I think we're known for ingenuity as well, and engineering, and we have you know, proper ways of going about things, you know, and we want to maintain that. So
Absolutely.
We used to be, get stuff done nation. Right?
yeah, it used to be, but we got to bring that back.
Yeah.
Make manufacturing great again, and
Yeah, I'm in.
yeah.
Look, the big disappointment out of the whole Candace thing is and maybe I shouldn't be disappointed, it's the reason I built the Ark in the first place, is because Sky News once again let us down, just as they did in COVID. They censored the most successful broadcaster in Australia, Alan Jones. They took him off because of Craig Kelly segments.
Yep.
They allowed Craig Kelly to be removed from Parliament from the Liberal Party, and on top of that, he was forced out. They say he resigned. He was forced out. And then on top of that, once he left the safety of his Liberal Party, 2 months later, Facebook removes him and Instagram removes him, despite there being no violations on Instagram. And it's just like, and Linktree also removed him, which is why I never trust Linktree. And so I see these things going on, and then it's okay. Oh, that's fine, guys. That we were right. Sky News, yep, no worries. Bring them all back on. You're fine now. And then they go and do this crap and say, oh yeah, we believe in the battle of ideas. And then they leave Candace out.
Yep.
They keep her out. Send the black woman to the back of the bus. It's just like, I believe that.
Well said.
Seriously, and I believe
said.
Tucker Carlson probably does have the same views as Candace on Israel-Palestine, but they allowed him in. They didn't police it. Now, Candace isn't inciting violence, and Candace isn't doxing people. Therefore, why... She doesn't even have a criminal record. Why are we leaving her out? And it's just like the best disinfectant for bad ideas is more speech.
Exactly.
And if you're not prepared to do that, then you're the bad guy. You're the bad guy. And that's why I built the studio. That's why I built the Ark. It's because it's a story that Jews, Christians, and Muslims are meant to respect. It's a story that the Abrahamic religions can respect, and they can get us focused back on the bloody rainbow people that stole. That's where we got the rainbow from. It's from the freaking story of Noah and the Ark. But the people, apparently, we've forgotten. We didn't even remember that. We've totally forgotten that. And so when I see what's going on with the Candace ordeal, when I see what's going on with this stuff, I do get fired up about it, and I do get quite upset because they're attacking the values that made Australia great. Chris, did you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I actually listened to ADHTV for a change. Not a lot to watch. You used to be on there. Chris Smith interviewed Candace on there. She was meant to be on Sky News.
Is that right?
They dumped her, but because of time. But they did have time for a 18-minute segment blasting Candace Owens. Mr. Bolt seemed to have time for that.
Actually, you'll get Candace an hour earlier on the other side.
Right there.
No offense, Chris, but not to Chris Smith, but I'm looking forward to watching Chris's interview as well. But I mean, it's she has to do this. She's doing our media because she can't get she's being cancelled. I think she said the Today Show cancelled her, right? I mean, it's like,
Sky
sorry.
News. Sky News cancelled.
Well, that was sad for me. Yeah, because I quite like Sky News.
Me too. Yeah, me too. And that's what's shocking about all of this. The Today Show, as you were alluding to, so you talked about this in your interview. The Today Show had her booked, and they similarly said, we're overscheduled. I don't know what the F that means. It's like, how do you overschedule? And then, you just add another seat.
You can overschedule, but Candace Owens, you move stuff around.
Oh, literally. And then the idea that you then used the segment, that time that you'd booked, to attack her without the right of reply. It's like, what the hell? And you know what's going to be really awkward about this? This whole, Tony Burke, if he does do something stupid, we might be in a situation where we're getting out free speeched by New Zealand because she ends up getting the visa there. Because we'll probably get that before Australia makes a decision.
Protest at Tony Burke's office tomorrow at 1 p.m. The refugees are mad, so I'll be there. So if you want to protest Tony Burke, it might be a good time. You can join in.
Mate, the only time you find me protesting is when it's illegal to protest.
Yeah.
That's when you should. That's why there's no more freedom protests anymore.
How would a Candace Owens protest? Would that be legal?
I reckon it's worth telling them to those immigrants to do that. That's the one useful thing they could do. But I think what they're demanding is completely out of order, to be honest. But anyway, going back to it, guys, I really appreciate you joining me on here. I think that this has been a thoroughly enjoyable discussion for me that's sorely needed, and that's why the Ark exists. But if you guys want to follow these fine gentlemen, I will have their links in the description to their phenomenal podcasts. Chris has my respect with regards to journalism. You ask the right questions on the ground, and I love how you drawed a call for incitement to the farmers from what was his name? Plimer. Mr. Plimer saying don't send the food to the cities. Yeah, I was just like, whoa, that is some Canberra protest talk right there. But he was was making the point that if you're not being treated respectfully, so you need to make them realise that you're going to go hungry. You need us. And Moe, thank you so much.
Thank you
for coming on. I really appreciate it. I want to get you back soon to do a deeper dive into the.
We've got a country to save. That's why I'm here. I just have a ladder. I push cable for a living, turn a screwdriver. I shouldn't be here, but I'm only here just because I want to save this country.
Amen.
I don't want to do this, but I've been pushed to it.
No, God bless you, man. And like us, you don't want these Muslim girls in these schools having transgender kids come in.
Oh, definitely.
And the girls can't take their hijab off because and I totally get that. And guys, you can follow Paul. You don't have social media.
Working on it. Yep, getting there.
Right. Well, let's get you on X soon, and then I can push everyone there. And Damien Curry, I really want to thank you for coming on. You've flown in from Queensland, not just for this, but you've got the event tomorrow, the conference for Battalion Art.
Yeah.
And everyone can follow you on the Other Side podcast. But
on YouTube at the Other Side. At Other Side Oz AUS, and X is the same. Yeah,
absolutely. These gentlemen are with me all the time here. But if you, next time you're around, I'd love to have you on. And mate, you do really well in person. You do really well in person. I really think you got to do. No, honestly, I think you should do more in person. Stuff. I think your audience would love that. I really do.
Happy to, mate. And congratulations on the Ark too. I think it's a great concept. And this studio, I've got serious studio envy. We've got a great studio up at Trending Media Australia. I've got to say big plug for the guys, but no, this is a great setup you got here. Next time I want some brown liquid in here. I noticed that you had brown liquid.
No, look, absolutely. Look,
is it real or fake?
I don't know.
It is Friday night. Sorry, mate.
It is too. Look, after I switched, look, we did just have a highly contentious discussion. I thought, what, just for this one, we'll leave the brown liquor down. I can handle it. But I do have some in the corner for us. Maybe we'll have some of Pauline Hanson's gin. I don't know. But thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to doing part 2 of this discussion. And ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to subscribe and like the podcast here. Please consider becoming a donor because we are getting demonetized everywhere, but that's okay. And good news, just this last week. Last week, I did say to you we reached 900,000 viewers in a week. We've just cracked a little over 1 million views, and that's thanks to you guys sharing this around. Despite the censorship, despite the bastards in California censoring us, a third of our views are coming from uncensorable platforms. And thanks to you guys sharing it out there, it's kicking off very, very well. So thank you so much. God bless you all. I'm here at your disposal, and very soon I will be telling you about how you can fight back in the local elections in New South Wales and Victoria, and also the state election in October. So I will see you guys soon. God bless you. Thank you so much. And this was episode 13 of the Ark Podcast. Bye-bye.